Got questions for you folks. Is there anything worse than death? Is it possible for a criminal to choose capital punishment over life imprisonment? Listen, yes, there are prisons in this world where the death penalty could be considered a better destiny. Prisons filled with unspeakable horrors that even the toughest criminals' knees would melt down in agony. Stay tuned as we take a peek into the world's worst prisons. Let us begin our countdown. Number 10. Black Dolphin Prison, Russia. If you would ask any Russian about life in their local prisons, they would say the same thing: worst. However, Black Dolphin Prison is the worst among the worst. It is located on the Kazakhstan border and is considered one of the oldest prisons. Got its name from the statue at the front of the building, which the prisoners built themselves. The only way to get away from this prison is by dying, since only inmates with life sentences are sent here. It houses about 700 inmates who together have a murder count of about 3,500 shared equally. That is at least 5 victims per inmate. And the horrific part, it also houses cannibals, assault perpetrators of the worst kind, maniacs, terrorists, and pedophiles. 2 inmates are forced to share 50 square foot cells that are secured behind 3 sets of steel doors. Cells are monitored 24 hours a day and guards make their rounds every 15 minutes. If they need to go out of the cell, the prisoners bent over the waist and are blindfolded, so they never have a sense of their surroundings. No prison yard, no cafeteria, and no choice of food but soup and bread. Meals should be eaten in their dingy cells. If hell is real, Black Dolphin Prison can be considered one. Number 9. Ciudad Barrios, El Salvador. Another prison considered as hell by the El Salvadorians. It is so dangerous. It houses 2 of the world's most notorious gangs, the MS-13 and the Barrio 18 gangs. Here, death comes without any warning. Living conditions here are so bad that things like food or a place to lay your head could easily turn into a fight to the death with anyone who contests. The prison's reputation for lawlessness and violence is so real that even the guards are terrified of entering the prison. The result? The entire system is being run by the gang members. Number 8. PETAK Island Prison, Russia. Known as the Alcatraz of Russia, it is sitting in isolation on the vast Novozero Lake. This tiny prison houses 193 prisoners, all on life sentences. The inmates are usually the worst of the worst. They are looking for anything that could be used as a weapon or a means of escape. Each of the inmates are kept in a small 2-man cell for 23 hours a day. Escape is impossible because inmates are not even allowed out of their cell except for 1 hour where they stand in a cage they can barely pace. Making life more difficult is the lack of basic sanitation facilities. No proper toilets and bathroom. Inmates do their business in a steel bucket and then find sleep on thin beds. Some compared living in this prison as those with the zoo during a winter because the island is surrounded by freezing waters. It greatly contributes to breaking the spirits of their inmates. Number 7. KWANG Prison, Bangkok, Thailand. A very specific reason to make it one of the worst prisons on earth. Many of its inmates were foreigners who were once tourists in their land. Each room is shared with 24 people, which makes life very difficult for the inmates. Even getting into the toilet is hard since they were all occupied. Surprisingly, tourists could get a one-way ticket to this prison just by reading a wrong book, staying in groups of 5, or even eating a sandwich in public. Life in Bangkok is beyond harsh for inmates, especially in the first 3 months. They wear iron chains, serve food that is often infested with maggots, and do not have access to clean water. Just a couple of years ago, a British man was thrown into jail for fighting back to a Thai gang that battered him and cost him an eye and lots of injuries. Number 6. GITARAMA Central Prison, Rwanda. There is an overcrowding in most prisons on this list, but none is worse than GITARAMA's prison in Rwanda. The facility, which is designed to hold just over 1,300 inmates, now houses 8,000. To find a spot to lie down is certainly luck. Most inmates are forced to stand up all day or negotiate with those who have claimed portions of the ground. a damp place and oftentimes filled with raw feces. Complex issues had arisen, and many prisoners died from disease and suffocation. There had been cases of inmates feasting on each other out of hunger and cannibalism. A limited amount of documentation exists about what goes on behind these prison bars, and prison guards have been brainwashed to believe that prisoners in their care are subhuman. Just last year, 2,000 people died in Rwanda prisons, the majority of which happened within the walls of GITARAMA's central prison. Number 5. KAMITI Maximum Security Prison, Kenya. The fact that this prison houses the worst of the worst makes it stand out from the rest. As a result of a state of emergency declared in October 1952, the prison was built in 1954 by its British colonizers based on a colonial-style prison system. Today, it still has its original gallows, and it has gotten even more hellish than it was more than half a century ago. It is overcrowded since a prison that should house 1,200 inmates houses almost 3,000 recently. Overpopulation has led to diseases such as HIV and AIDS, syphilis, tuberculosis, and a whole host of others. Since the prison system is the government's favorite dumping ground for political dissidents, it is plagued with unending unrest and corruption. Most of the inmates are uneducated, which makes the prison system chaotic. Only the smartest, the bravest, and the most ruthless can survive behind its walls. Number 4. GLDANI Prison, Georgia. Even though there was a claim that this prison was made better and violence had stopped, the terrifying legacy of GLDANI Prison has continued to haunt every possible detainee in Georgia. A 35-year-old former prison guard turned whistleblower leaked a video in 2012 showing inmates' experiences at the hands of the guards. The video is too graphic to show, but what they did and had been doing for decades to prisoners had been exposed by the ex-prison guard. Every night, random inmates were routinely sodomized with broom handles. They were often beaten, drowned, their bones purposely broken, burnt, all at the hands of the sadistic guards. It was institutionalized torture. An ex-inmate recalled how they tore off his fingernails, damaged his skull, broke his leg bones, ribs, nose, and teeth. He is 43 years old but looks like an old man who often falls down while walking. According to the government, the prisons are fine today and the torture has been halted, but I doubt you'd want to find out for yourself. Number 3. Mendoza Prison, Argentina. The top 90 most dangerous convicts in all of Argentina are held in Pavilion 5 of Mendoza Prison. This section is so dangerous that no guard would dare enter it. Often, inmates' meals are just left at predetermined spots around the door. The prison has a serious overcrowding problem where 1,600 inmates share a facility that was designed for only 600. Prisoners are forced to sleep on the floor where they are often subjected to random, intense, and frequent torture. But it doesn't end there. Toilets are non-existent as prisoners are forced to defecate in plastic bags and urinate in bottles. The corridors are literally filled with garbage, human waste, and slime. Conditions have become so unbearable that there are reports that prisoners who demanded better living conditions literally had their mouths sewn. Yet it still gets worse. The food they eat is sludge, and those who aren't strong, fast, or smart enough often go hungry and die under mysterious circumstances, as the authorities like to call them. Number 2. DIYARBAKIR Prison, Turkey. It was the center of one of the most abusive regimes in Turkey in the 1980s. Kurdish men and women suffered horrific forms of torture in what was regarded as one of the world's worst prisons at the time. These days, the second worst, but nothing has improved. It is even possible to argue that conditions have deteriorated, as children are also locked up inside the same prison where the sludges of society are being housed and tortured. Inmates are beaten, violated, maimed, forced to eat excrement, and electrocuted by their genitalia, which is so dehumanizing. Prisoners are forced to salute the director's dog, participate in mock executions that might or might not ever take place, and bathe in sewers. Just to give you an idea of how desperate the situation is, prisoners routinely go on fast protest to ask to improve their conditions And more often than not, these prisoners simply die from starvation. Recently, 4 prisoners set their bodies on fire while an inmate set his cell on fire before hanging himself in resistance. Number 1. Camp 22, North Korea. It is not just one prison facility but a series of identity prison camps containing up to 200,000 prisoners. It's stretched across the length of North Korea. Starvation is not a novelty. It is every prisoner's reality. Every day for the duration of their existence, inmates are fed a sludge of cornmeal and cabbage. And to avoid dying of malnutrition, prisoners have to supplement their diet with rats and insects. Proof of such is the literal extinction of rodents. Knowing the way rats reproduce, you'll know that this statement is impressive. 20 to 25% of the prison population die every year. Inmates who are not dying of malnutrition are considered more unlucky because the prison guards make their lives more unbearable. Little girls born in the camp are often fed to dogs and train them to be more vicious. As stress relief for the guards, inmates are often brutalized. And if they attempt to escape, everyone in their family, even those unaware of their escape attempt, will be tortured. Pregnancy is also strictly forbidden. Those caught pregnant are often tied to a tree, the fetus cut from their tummy and killed instantly. The best thing every inmate wishes in Camp 22 is dying because living means never-ending suffering. And so, answer my questions at the beginning of this video. Is there anything worse than death? Let us know your thoughts.